I'm going to reorganize these to clear some space for my binder. If I do something wrong, somebody yell at me. Good morning, everybody. Today I'm filing two proposals that put landowners first and put Iowa on a path of growth and prosperity. I started this legislative session by telling Iowans about my vision for the state. And it is a vision where energy is abundant and affordable, where Iowans can exercise their private property rights, and private investment can find voluntary easements to help our state grow. Currently, our system is overregulated, and government has inserted itself between investment and private property rights, creating needless conflict between investors and landowners. This process must be improved, and these bills will do just that. Affordability in Iowa also must be improved. These proposals will help lower the cost of energy, increase markets for Iowa's agricultural products, raise incomes for farmers, create more manufacturing jobs for Iowans, provide millions of hours of work for skilled trades, and accelerate Iowa's path to zero income tax. All those results are possible with voluntary agreements between investors and landowners. I'll walk through the bill and highlight how we accomplish those goals. The bill provides the means for Hazardous Liquid Pipeline, or HLP company, to devise alternative routes for a proposed pipeline avoiding land that cannot be acquired through voluntary transactions. And it requires the company diligently to exhaust those alternatives before it can be eligible to request authorization by the Utilities Commission as the last resort to use eminent domain. Current law limits a company's easement acquisition efforts by requiring individual mailed notices to owners of identified parcels affected by a proposed project. The bill enables the company to actively pursue alternative routes. It allows the company at any time after the mandatory county informational meeting to contact any landowner within a voluntary easement corridor that includes land anywhere in the county and anywhere within 5 miles of the initially proposed route for the purpose of proposing voluntary purchases of easements. The company must provide a landowner all the information presented at the meeting. A landowner may opt out of any further contact from the company except for mail. The bill requires the company to make a diligent effort to assemble a route consisting exclusively of voluntary easements. It may not request the power of eminent domain without providing to the IUC that it has made that diligent effort. The bill sets out in detail the procedures and timelines for the company's easement acquisition efforts. It requires the company to perform a landowner about the easement it seeks and to request permission to conduct a civil survey. There are specific deadlines for a survey and for a determination of land suitability. The company may then make an offer to purchase an easement, including specified disclosures and terms, and a figure for cash compensation. These provisions regularize the process and add transparency for landowners. The bill provides a 1-year time frame for easement acquisition efforts. If the company is unable to acquire voluntary easements for a complete route, it shall file with the IUC information detailing its efforts to do so. And if it applies for eminent domain power, the company shall file evidence proving that it diligently sought to devise a route of voluntary easements and that it was unable due to technical or engineering infeasibility of construction in a specific location, infeasibility of compliance with federal safety requirements in a specific location, or adverse effects on safety. Overall economic infeasibility due to excessive easement acquisition costs, which must be shown by clear and convincing evidence, or landowner opt-out from communications with company, or rejection of offers based on IUC-approved valuation methodology. There's other components in the bill, but those are the most important ones. Now let's talk about why this bill is important for Iowa. This bill helps to ensure that Iowa farmers who are struggling now have access to additional markets for their corn. Access to those markets become even more critical as Iowa farmers continue to record record harvests, with this year's being the highest ever with over 2.77 billion bushels harvested. The need for access to new markets was made evident last week, when a 25-cent drop in corn prices cost Iowa farmers $692 million in lost income. With 60% of Iowa corn going to ethanol and projected market prices in the mid-$3 range, it's of the utmost importance that we gain access to new low-carbon ethanol markets to ensure Iowa farmers and Iowa can not only survive, but thrive. Emerging new low-carbon ethanol markets like special aviation fuel, or SAF, require ethanol with a low carbon intensity score to be marketable. Iowa's average CI score currently lies in the mid-50s. We need to compete with states like Nebraska, whose CI score, due to carbon capture pipelines, will be in the high teens, giving them a huge advantage over Iowa ethanol plants and Iowa corn growers in the exploding SAF market. The U.S. airline industry pledged to consume 3 billion gallons of SAF by 2030. and that does not count in the major SAF commitments by Europe. The bill also ensures Iowa ethanol plants have access to enhanced oil recovery markets where CO2 can help increase oil recovery by 60%. With studies showing there's an estimated 200 billion barrels of oil that can be recovered using CO2 in America, this presents a whole new market for Iowa CO2. Oil wells, CO2 is 30% more effective than standard water recovery methods and more effective than conventional fracking. Oil wells lose production due to a loss of reservoir pressure. This pressure can be recreated using CO2 and has been for the last 20 years. Wyoming alone has an estimated 2 billion barrels of stranded oil. Permian Basin in Texas, just the Permian Basin, 7 billion barrels, and Oklahoma holds 1 billion barrels. Access to these new markets easily have the potential to add $1 per bushel to the price of Iowa corn. Based on last year's yields, this would add $3.8 billion to the Iowa economy. That would make Iowa farmers profitable again and have a huge impact on Iowa's overall economic health. Access to these markets is not optional for Iowa farmers in Iowa. It is a necessity. And secondly, the second bill I'm dropping today will place a severance tax on the CO2 flowing through these carbon capture pipelines. This tax will be generated and placed in the Taxpayer Relief Fund and will be used to continue Iowa's path to zero income tax. I'll take any questions.
What is the severance tax? What is the percentage of?
The severance tax is a flat fee per metric ton, and the severance tax is modeled after other states like Wyoming, North Dakota, Texas. Any states that have natural resources, typically underground natural resources, place a severance tax on that. And typically it's by the barrel. So Wyoming, for example, places a severance tax in every barrel of oil that they draw from the ground. And that severance tax has allowed those states to go to zero income tax. And how we connect the dots here is Wyoming has 3 billion barrels of oil yet to be recovered in their wells. So those wells are underperforming due to loss of pressure. So the state of Wyoming, along with the oil companies producing oil in Wyoming, have a vested interest in enhancing the production output of those wells. From the state's perspective, if they can take a well producing 10 barrels a day and use CO2 for EOR and raise that to 1,000 barrels a day, well, the state makes more severance tax on that, and the oil companies make more profitability. And that aligns us completely with President Trump's energy dominance policy.
You said that it's essential that Iowa farmers have access to these markets. Does that rule out you from supporting the House Republicans' proposal that bans eminent domain for carbon credits?
I believe the proposals we are introducing today in the Senate can get us to the point where we all but eliminate the need for utilizing eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines or any other HLP pipelines, while still recognizing the fact that Iowa needs to have investment in linear infrastructure, but also recognizing the importance of landowner rights. This sets the table for if somebody does not want to enter into an agreement, they have the ability to say no. The pipeline company would then have the ability to devise a route going around that individual and find willing landowners that want to participate in the easement and benefit financially from that easement.
You have 26 votes for this bill right now.
I won't talk about internal caucus matters at this point in time.
What do you say to landowners? You know, some of the landowners who have been pushing for pipeline for eminent domain protections have said that just widening the corridor is good for, you know, a pipeline company, but not necessarily good for the landowners in the path. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would argue that it's good for both. I mean, this is a relationship, like I said, like I just finished saying, this is a relationship that allows a property owner that does not wish to enter into a voluntary easement to say no. Currently, under Iowa law, that pipeline company has no other option to go around that landowner. This allows that option to take place. This allows that pipeline company to find a willing participant in the expanded corridor, right, in the voluntary easement corridor, so that individual landowner can benefit financially from it and the infrastructure can be built. Again, in my opening speech on the floor, we look at states that have policies similar to the one that we're passing, and we see success. 230 miles of pipe was built through Kansas and Colorado, delivering jet fuel to the Denver International Airport, and that whole pipeline project was built without using eminent domain once. And that's because those states have policies similar to the one I'm proposing in Iowa.
Do you have an indication that Summit is planning to go to one of these other states where enhanced oil recovery is more feasible than North Dakota, where it's contemplated?
I'm not going to speak to Summit's intentions. I'll speak to what the Trump administration's intentions were. About 3 weeks ago, they released an interesting article on the Permian Basin in Texas, talking specifically about those wells down there and their loss of pressure and their low performance. The Trump administration's perspective is if we have the ability to, again, use CO2 for EOR, which is not new technology. They've been using it for 20 years. But the access of CO2 in that area has been kind of limited, so there's not a lot of it there to get the job done. But if you already have holes drilled in the ground, underperforming wells, you have infrastructure connecting those to refineries, you have all that stuff built and laid out. Trump administration and their energy dominance proposals see huge benefit in using CO2 for EOR. And that's something we couldn't speak about in the last 4 years. I mean, President Biden came in, stroke of his pen, he killed the Keystone Pipeline. He was very aggressively postured against fossil fuel and energy dominance. With the new administration, it gives the ability to have that conversation now, finally, about the benefits of CO2 for EOR.
For landowners who do have those concerns about eminent domain, I mean, just walk through, I guess, maybe why you feel like the steps in the bill that the company would have to prove that says it's exhausted all of its options first. Like, why are those going to rule out the vast majority of concerns?
I think a couple of reasons, right? So we put due diligence on the back of the companies building the infrastructure first, right? They've got to prove out that they either couldn't build there, couldn't obtain an easement. And at the end of the day, I mean, if you talk to pipeline companies, I mean, Senate Republican caucus doesn't want eminent domain to be utilized. I mean, we want to try to minimize the impact of eminent domain on building any infrastructure projects. And pipeline companies want the same thing. From their perspective, I don't think pipeline companies enjoy utilizing eminent domain as a last resort or as any resort. This bill gives them the ability to structure a complete voluntary easement route with landowners that are willing to enter into those voluntary easement agreements and benefit financially from those while respecting the rights of the folks that don't want to enter into those agreements.
Just a little bit farther, for the landowners who then they get that, but they wonder what is the assurance that the pipeline company doesn't just continue using it, even if that's how the bill is intended. They want some assurance that the pipeline company won't just use it and change their route.
Well, the pipeline company, first and foremost, before they even can ask for the right to utilize eminent domain, must show to the IUC they've exhausted all potential options to go around that piece, that parcel, or that property owner. And that's an exhaustive process. And the IUC will then conduct a hearing based off the findings and the presentation from the pipeline company, and they'll make a determination. And the way we have the bill structured, due diligence is of the utmost importance to ensure the pipeline companies check all the boxes to make sure that, before they make the request, that they've done everything they can possibly do to find a voluntary corridor.
Since Summit's already gone through a lot of this processes with the IUC, would this impact then, or is this future?
So it impacts phase one. It allows the Summit to open up the notice corridor to voluntary easement corridor in phase one. It completely impacts phase two, and it would completely impact any other HLP projects moving forward.
Would the IUC have any oversight over like route changes if it were like, say they found a viable route, but it was through land that was potentially like unstable or wouldn't be the best to house a pipeline?
So the pipeline company would have to make that case when they filed, as to why that parcel could not be utilized to assemble the voluntary easement corridor.
Why does Senate Republicans think this is the best possible solution?
So again, looking at all HLPs in general, oil, heating oil, carbon sequestration pipelines, I think it's important for us to take a holistic view as to the fact that we don't want to utilize eminent domain if we absolutely don't need to. I mean, this bill will all but eliminate the need to utilize eminent domain for all hazardous liquid pipelines, which is essential for us. And I think our conversation right now is focused on one pipeline and one company. But let's not forget, a few years back, we had Dakota Access go through the northwest section of the state and had similar concerns. So I think it's time for Senate Republicans, as a caucus, to step up and have a holistic approach and a conversation about how we cure this issue once and for all.
Some of the county Republicans passed a resolution censuring you for removing Senator Campbell from his committees this year, and they seem to believe it's related to his support for legislation last year on eminent domain. Can you talk about that?
I won't discuss private caucus matters.
Let's say these pipelines are built and then 10 years, 20 years from now, some of these oil reserves are exhausted. And I mean, what do you say to the people who say that the Iowa legislature should be helping farmers diversify so that the Iowa farm economy is not so heavily dependent on markets for corn?
We grow a lot of corn in Iowa. I mean, record harvest this year, 2.77 billion bushels of corn. 60% of it goes into ethanol right now. I think it's essential for us to find markets. And I talked about multiple markets, right? The SAF market is an ongoing market that requires low CI ethanol to be able to achieve that market access. And EOR is not going to go away. We're talking about existing wells that are drilled currently right now that have lost pressure to make those wells perform less than they should. And as we continue to do oil exploration, and like I said, that the 7 billion barrels in Texas was just the Permian Basin. You talk about 200 billion barrels across this country that are recoverable right now, utilizing CO2 for EOR. That's a huge potential market. And that's just in existing wells that are currently drilled. So oil exploration will continue, especially under the Trump administration. I see a long-term market for CO2 for EOR.
Technical question, 1 year for coming to these agreements, do they have to go through the whole year?
They don't. The pipeline company can approach the IUC within 6 months. A year is kind of, we want to make some time certain stuff in here, right? And so we wanted also to make sure that, landowners are in the driver's seat on this bill, right? So if I'm a pipeline company and I go to landowner Mike Klimesh, and Mike Klimesh says, I don't want to talk to you, that's the end of the conversation. You can communicate with me through the mail, right? But you cannot come to my door. The only person that can actually restart those conversations and negotiations is Mike Klimesh. So we put that in play. And we don't want to leave this an open-ended process for a lot of reasons. To give both the companies and the landowners that are involved in those negotiations closure, right? So we put the year, but there's a 6-month window where the pipeline company feels that they've assembled a route, they can then begin the process.
Did you say this applies only to hazardous liquid pipelines?
Yes, this bill applies to all HLPs currently.
Why not apply the same principle to other projects like transmission lines?
Different code sections. Yep. We're focusing on the HLP code section. There may be a conversation in this session about doing something similar with a similar piece of legislation to transmission lines. I'm not sure where the Congress wants to go with that. Our primary focus with this bill is the HLP code sections.
What's the timeline for Senate consideration?
I'd like to get this done as soon as possible. We have a lot of other important work to do this year. This is very important. It's very important to myself and to the caucus. And that's why we're introducing it early on in the session. I don't want this to be an issue that lingers. I want us to come to consensus with the House, find a path forward, open up access to additional markets for Iowa farmers who are desperately looking for that relief right now, and put this behind us in a way that benefits all landowners.
How similar is this proposal to the amendment that you ran on, that you had on the floor last time?
So that amendment, Booslow amendment last year that we ran, had a lot of different moving parts to it, right? I mean, there was some land restoration piece, there was some crop loss pieces in there, there was some communication notification pieces, and that bill was very complex. And so my hopes were to take, what was kind of our foundational piece in the Booslow amendment and just drill it down to the most important avenue that we could find to alleviate the concerns about eminent domain. And so that's where this bill kind of migrated out of that. And this bill is very robust in its nature. So we took the simple, more limited ability for route deviations in that bill, and then we baked in a whole bunch of additional stuff requiring the pipeline companies to go through this process of due diligence to ensure that all the potential parcels in the voluntary easement corridor are exhausted, which wasn't part of that bill last year.